Good morning, and welcome back to our study of the book of Colossians. This is lesson 6, and today we're in chapter 3, the first 11 verses. Now, in the first two chapters of this book, Paul is really laying out for the Colossians the theology under which he is coming, the idea that you don't need anything besides Christ. If you believe in Christ, in his death and in his resurrection, then you need nothing else. And in spite of what the Gnostics were coming into the church saying, that this is all you really needed. They were saying you needed special knowledge. They were saying you needed special ways of doing things, and only that they could supply this knowledge. But Paul was saying this is foolishness. If you have Christ, then you don't need anything else. And he listed the 4 or 5 things which he was against. One, of course, was intellectualism, where they were saying you did need special knowledge. You did need extra knowledge which only they had. And Paul was saying this is not true. You don't need that. You have Christ, and Christ is enough. You don't need rituals. You don't need the rituals that the Jewish people and the pagan people did. You don't need the actual ideas that you had to go through certain ways of doing things, the ritualistic type of living. And Paul was saying this is also not necessary. This is, again, put aside because of Christ's death and resurrection. And if you believe in that, then that is sufficient. You also don't need legalism. You don't need to be bound by the old laws, or by mysticism, by praying to people other than Christ, or by asceticism, by denying yourself those aspects of life which otherwise might be enjoyable, might be necessary. There's no need to deny yourself as things you couldn't eat, or couldn't taste, or couldn't handle. This was not required. It said in verse 20 of chapter 2, "Therefore, if you died with Christ, you died from the basic principles of the world." Why do people keep living as though they were still in the world? So now he's into chapter 3, and he starts off by saying, "If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth, for you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory." So he is saying, if you fully believe and accept it that Christ died for you, and that you died with Christ, therefore you are a new person, a new type of creation. It happened in your past because it says you were raised with him. So you already are a new person in Christ. And it's happening now because you are in Christ. You are with Christ. Your life is hidden now with Christ in God. It is protected. And you may not be a type of person which is an extrovert or someone who does things in public, but you can be with Christ in God in private. You can do it privately. You don't have to have any great amount of external evidence. But you can be with Christ because it is hidden with Christ in God. And then in the future you will appear with him in glory. It says that in the past we were raised with Christ. If we died with Christ, as it says in verse 20 of chapter 2, then it says we are raised with Christ. It says in 2 Corinthians 5:17, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. So, people have changed. They are a new creation if they have accepted Christ and accepted his death and resurrection fully. And that is really all they need. You were raised with him. If you died with him, you raised with him. You are hidden with him, and you will return with him. So you have a new creation, and you have a new outlook, or you should have a new outlook, because it says here, seek those things which are above. Set your mind on things above, because your outlook should be now on things above, not necessarily things on this earth. And we all have to still live here. We have to go through the routine of daily living and helping each other. But at the same time, our mind should be primarily set on what is above and on Christ at the right hand of God the Father. So we are a new creation, according to Paul in this chapter, and we have a new outlook, a new perspective on things. We do not exactly know how this will all turn out when we return with him. It says in 1 John 3:2, "Now we are children of God, and it has not yet been revealed what we shall be, but we know that when he is revealed, we shall be like him and see him as he is." So there's still a mystery to this, but the point is that we have been raised with him, we are now hidden with him, and we will be with him when he returns. So while we're here on earth, we should be seeking and looking towards him. It says in Psalm 73, verse 25, "There is none on earth I desire besides you." And this should be our outlook for the primary purpose of our lives. So we are a new creation, we have a new outlook, and we should have new priorities. And Paul goes on then to list things that we should avoid. And these are in 5 different sections. He said, "Therefore put to death your members which are on the earth." If we are going to seek what is above and see what is in heaven, we have to stop looking for those things which are on earth. "Put to death your members which are on earth, in fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, all of which are sexual in nature." We have to maintain ourselves as best we can in the cleanliness of pure sexual love for our wives, for our spouses. This is the idea of pure sex. None of us, unfortunately, are immune from being involved with some things which are not the best thing to be involved with. And sometimes we slip, sometimes we all slip. But this is the idea we should try to avoid as much as possible. "Put to death your members which are on earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire." And then it goes those mental things. The first are physical, this is a mental thing, because now he says covetousness. And again, we all slip at times in this as well, because we all end up wanting something that someone else may have. Now, there is legitimate desire to have things which are nice, which are required, which are necessary, and that's not really being covetousness. But when we desire something to the extreme, or need something which someone else only has, then it becomes a sin. It says that coveting is idolatry. It's the worship of a false god. You're wanting something. You have your mind set on something which is false, and is a type of a false god. It's idolatry. Being content is actually praise, because it is being accepting, and it is being content and agreeable with what God has already given you. Doesn't mean you can't try to better yourself by doing things in a rational and reasonable way. It doesn't mean you can't improve yourself. But there's a difference between doing it in a way which is pleasing to God and a way which is coveting someone else's possessions or someone else's position. So there's a fine line between the two, but he says we have to avoid coveting, have to avoid covetousness. And then he says there are also other priorities. He says because of these things, because of the idolatry of sexual problems and of covetousness, because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience, those people who keep doing these things, in which you yourselves once walked when you lived in them. Paul is saying that most people have, at that time, and probably still today, are involved in some of these things, but to try to get away from them as much as possible. in which you yourselves once walked when you lived in them. But now you yourselves are to put off all these. Now he's talking about some social problems: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy. All of these things which are social problems which interfere with the interaction between people. And if you are truly involved with Christ, and truly involved with the Christian relationship, then there should be very little anger or malice or wrath involved in your personal relationships. Very little. Like I said, we're all human, and sometimes we slip. But very little, and it should be attempt to be put off these things as much as possible. Then it says there are verbal, blasphemy, and filthy language should also not be tolerated. We are to put aside all of these things because we are a new creation. Because if you believe that Christ died for you and was raised from the dead, and you died with him because of your belief, then these are things which you are to try to put off, put to death, and put aside. Do not lie to one another, since you have put off the old man with his deeds. Lying is another verbal problem which we have to put aside, along with blasphemy and filthy language. You have put us off these things. You have put these things aside and have put on the new man. You have put all this aside as the old person which died with Christ. Now you've put on a new man, a new person, a new creation who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of him. Renewed in knowledge. You now have the wisdom and the vision and the knowledge of Christ, made full in Christ, renewed in him, created him, in Christ who created him. Therefore there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave nor free, but Christ is all and in all. In the days when Paul wrote this, there was a great deal of dissension in the churches, because the churches were new, and there were people from all backgrounds coming into the church, and sometimes these backgrounds had long histories of animosity towards one another, especially the Jews and the Gentiles. So he is now saying that once you have renewed knowledge in Christ, once you have put your faith in Christ, once you've become a new creation, then all of these other differences should be abolished. You should put aside the sexual and the mental and the verbal and the social animosities and difficulties which you had before. And should also put aside the total aspect of the old creation and take on a new purpose to live in harmony with each other, where there is neither Greek, a Gentile, nor Jew, where there's neither circumcised, which all the Jewish people were, or uncircumcised, which the Gentile people were. There were neither barbarian, Scythian, there were neither those who were uneducated or those who were educated, there was neither slave person or free people. Everyone was the same, and should be the same, and should be accepted as the same, and should be treated the same. They're all in Christ, and all in all. So this is the first part. Paul is saying in this first part of chapter 3, how we should live as Christians, how we should live and get along with each other. The old man, put aside the old purpose, the old creature, and take on the aspect of a new creation which is founded in Christ, raised in Christ, hidden in Christ, and who will return with Christ in the future. So this is the lesson of the first part of Colossians chapter 3, and that's sufficient for today. We'll get on next time to the further few verses in this chapter as we learn further in the book of Colossians. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.